Okay. So my practice is in the fields of private equity and venture capital. I work at Lavery in Montreal. My practice has evolved over the years, but it's been in private equity and venture capital for at least the last 4 or 5 years. And why I choose that practice? Actually, I feel that it kind of chose me instead. If you look at my career path, it looks like it's was planned from the very beginning. I started to work in the field of securities law, then M&A, and use those skills to go into private equity and venture capital. But the reality is that I actually came to realize that my practice was mostly in private equity and venture capital. I would say years after I did. I remember very clearly a few years ago, one of my colleagues from another firm that had joined Lavery told me, "Wow, I'm really impressed with the team that you have at Lavery in that field." And I remember at that time telling myself, thinking of all the work that I was doing, all the team that we had built at Lavery that was working in that field, and realizing that we had developed a practice that I didn't even realize. In terms of the qualities that always been the most important, at least for me, to in terms of the services that I deliver to my clients, was my ability to advise them not only on business legal matters, but on business risk management at large. I see business lawyers as people who should be looking at the business aspects of things with a wide view, with a risk management approach. And that goes without saying, but unfortunately, from what I've seen in general from lawyers, this is not done enough. And I've been trying to do that since I started to practice. This is one of the reasons, for example, that I went to do an MBA. I wanted really to be able to have the skills of a manager and not only of a business lawyer. In terms of the lawyer's practice, people tend to assume that teamwork is something that is exceptional and should happen only once in a while. And I think, unfortunately, it's still, even in 2015, even in the large law firms, to a certain extent, it's still like that. There's a lot of lawyers that work in silos. It's extremely... teamwork is not present enough. Of course, on a big transaction, there's going to be many people working together, but they're not really working together. Personally, teamwork and team experience, it's hard for me to pinpoint an exact moment, because I've made, at least, particularly in the last few years, I made an important point of making sure on a day-to-day basis, on all of my files, for everything I do with my clients, that we have a team approach. So there's always, we do regular meetings, even if it's not for a particular file, just to update each other. So all the associates that work with me on, even if it's on different files, they just come to my office. We go over everything that's outstanding to make sure that we all exchange information. With all of my clients, I make sure that all the associates that work with me know what's going on, even if they're not actually involved in a particular file. So for me, team experience is something that has to be done, that has to be on a day-to-day basis. One of the volunteering I've been doing the last few years has been with Jeunesse Musicale Canada. It's obviously in the cultural field. It's a great organization that gives bursaries and that to students that are, and when I say student, I mean like university ones that are extremely good. You could almost not differentiate them from the professionals. And so working with them, I learned all the reality of the cultural world, and something that took me a little bit away from what I knew from the purely business world, and into that other reality where they obviously financing is key, and there's the kind of network that evolves around that in that industry is extremely different. So I learned so much from that experience, from the people over there, from the approach, from the way of thinking, that I see pro bono and volunteering really as an opportunity to learn and to receive so much rather than giving. And it was even more the case with the other experience that I had when I've been working with the Fondation Montréal in Montreal, which is a great foundation giving bursaries to young businesses in Montreal that are startups that are trying to put in place a business. And on that front, I mean, working with those young entrepreneurs and obviously the fact that I'm practicing in the field of venture capital and private equity, that for me, that made total sense to be in contact with those companies that are eventually going to be either going to be my clients later on in time or targets of the VC funds that I represent.